Hey, I'm Felissa Rose, and you're watching Keto and Crime.
Hey everyone, welcome to Keto and Crime. I thought we'd have another, that courtesy of East Idaho News, we would do a little reaction to Chad Daybell pleading not guilty to the charges. So, with that being said, let's jump into it.
Voice presiding.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Okay. There's Kobe Ryan and Kay Woodcock. Kobe is...
All right, good morning, everyone. We'll be on
Whoa!
the record on this matter. This is KC.
Poor Kay. Look at her eyes. She is angry, and I don't blame her. Wow. There's like years of anger and frustration in those eyes. If Chad were to walk, her looks would kill him as soon as he set foot out of the courthouse. Wow. And why does East Idaho News feel the need to zoom in on her like this? Wow.
CR 22211623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. Mr. Daybell is here present.
And there is Kobe Ryan, that is Joseph Ryan's oldest son, Tylee's half-brother. The one that she supposedly texted right before she disappeared, and he was looking for her. So his face, if looks could kill, there's another knife in Daybell's back.
Present in court, appearing with his attorney, Mr. Pryor. Representing the state is Prosecutor Rob Wood and Lindsay Blake. Mr. Pryor, is your client ready?
Chad always looks like he's got something up his butt. I swear to God, look, his expression never changes. Look, it's just cold. Just cold. You gotta be a psychopath to be able not to show any emotion at all. Because he's gotta be feeling something, even if it's just fear for his own lousy skin. He just... Psychopath City, I swear. Just... His lawyer's thinking about how he's going to use that farm after Daybell loses it to him because he knows he ain't getting off.
Ready to proceed with arraignment this morning?
We are, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is the state ready to proceed?
We are, Your Honor. Thank you.
Very well. This proceeding's being recorded by the FTR recording system. It's also being live streamed on the court's YouTube channel for public availability of the hearing. In addition, in order to allow public access, we do have limited seating here, and that's consistent with our Supreme Court's operating order for social distancing. So we do have people in the courtroom as well, pursuant to that order. Mr. Daybell, as you know, I'm Judge Boyce. I'm the district judge for Fremont County, and I've been assigned to preside over this case. In a few minutes, I'll arraign you on criminal charges that have been brought against you.
I think that's 3 of Chad's children. I'm not sure which 3. I think that's Seth there. I recognize him because I think he is the one that read all of the books on Audible, and I recognize him because he was on the back cover. So I think that's him. The others, I'm not sure who they are, but it's hard to tell what they're feeling. It's just kind of some stunned looks on their eyes. It's hard to tell exactly what they're thinking, but they are evidently there supporting their father, so yay them.
issued by the state of Idaho pursuant to an indictment that was issued by a grand jury. Before doing so, I'll explain what will happen at this arraignment and then advise you of your constitutional rights and plea options. If at any time you need to communicate with Mr. Pryor in confidence, please advise me. We can arrange to have the two of you in a separate place outside the record of the court or anyone else and have a personal discussion if you require that during the time of this hearing. In this case, there was an indictment issued by the grand jury on May 25th, 2021. And
He just doesn't blink. He doesn't even blink. It's like, if ever there was an example of a lizard person, this is him.
that indictment sets forth the criminal charges that have been brought against you. The indictment's not evidence, rather it sets forth the criminal charges against you that would be prosecuted by the state of Idaho in this case. Mr. Pryor, have you received a copy of the indictment and reviewed that with your client, Mr. Daybell?
Yes, Your Honor, and at this time, we will waive formal reading of that indictment, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Pryor.
He wants to move things along. He's got more important things to do.
In a moment then, Mr. Daybell, I will advise you of the charges that are pending against you and explain the penalties associated with those charges. Next, I'll discuss, Mr. Pryor, your plea options and rights. The purpose of an arraignment is to have you enter a plea to the charges in the indictment. At the end of the arraignment, then you'll be asked to enter a plea. In that regard, you would have three options. Your first option is that you may enter a plea of not guilty to the charges. If you elect to plead not guilty, then a jury trial and a pretrial conference will be scheduled in this case. Also, by pleading not guilty, you would maintain all of your constitutional rights in this case, which rights were previously explained to you at an initial appearance on May 26, 2021 before the magistrate. Among those rights, you have, I'll go through some of those. You have the right to be presumed innocent. The presumption of innocence is a real and important right which lies at the foundation of our criminal justice system. Therefore, unless you either...
That just, as much as I am obsessed with this case, like lots of people in America and the world are, I don't know, it kind of conflicts with my beliefs in getting a fair trial, because where is this man going to get a fair trial? I mean, it's kind of one of those paradoxes. But, Chad, the bodies were found on your property. Come on, dude.
plead guilty at a later date or the state proves the charges against you beyond a reasonable doubt at trial, the presumption of innocence remains in your case. You also have the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of your peers, as well as the right to see, hear, confront, and have your attorney question all witnesses who may be called to testify against you. During the pendency of your case and at trial, you also have the right to be represented by an attorney. As you are in custody, you also have the right to communicate with your attorney at all stages of your case, and reasonable access to communicate with your attorney will be provided throughout these proceedings. At your trial, you would have the right to present evidence in your defense and the right to the subpoena power of this court to compel the attendance of witnesses to testify on your behalf. And finally, if you plead not guilty, you will retain the right to remain silent and exercise the privilege against compulsory self-incrimination. This means that you cannot...
Why did we need a close-up of his hands? Whoever's operating this camera is having way too much fun.
not be required to testify against yourself. However, you may voluntarily take the witness stand at trial if you so choose, but you cannot be compelled to do so. If you decide not to testify in your own behalf, then the prosecuting attorney could make no remarks about your failure to testify and cannot imply to the jury that exercising your constitutional right to remain silent is any indication of your guilt. The second option you would have today is to enter no plea at all. If you decide to do that, the court would enter a plea of not guilty for you, and you'd continue to maintain all of the rights that I've previously explained. And your third option at this arraignment is that you may plead guilty to any or all of the charges. However, it is important that you understand that if you do plead guilty, you would automatically waive rights, including rights under the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, as well as similar rights contained in the Idaho Constitution. In other words, if you decide to plead guilty, you would waive your right to a trial. There'd be no trial in your case, and you'd no longer be presumed innocent. The state would no longer have the burden of proving the case against you beyond a reasonable doubt. By pleading guilty, you would also give up your Sixth Amendment right to confront your accusers and cross-examine any witnesses against you, and give up your right to offer evidence of your own behalf in response to the state's case against you. You would also waive any defenses you have to the charges contained in the indictment, including any claims that there's a defect in the state of Idaho's case against you, or that you've been treated unfairly by the court. You'd give up also your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent.
Rob Woods has a nice beard, and I guess they want us to see it.
And the privilege against self-incrimination. And if you were to plead guilty, you would also be required to testify under oath concerning the facts of the alleged offenses in this case, to allow me to determine whether or not there's a factual basis for your plea, and whether the plea would be made knowingly, freely, and voluntarily, and to determine whether or not you fully understand the consequences of that plea. Finally, you are advised, if you decided to plead guilty, any testimony that you give while under oath concerning the alleged offenses.
If looks could kill, y'all. Look at that. Okay. I feel you, girl. I feel you. And my heart goes out to yours. Wow.
Could and would likely be used against you at a later trial if I were to not accept your plea for some reason, or if you later withdrew your plea.
Daggers.
It's very important to
Daggers.
understand all the rights and options I just explained to you. Before we go any further then with this proceeding, Mr. Daybell, do you have any questions on any of those rights I've just explained to you?
No.
Very well.
For somebody that's so wordy in his writing, he just doesn't talk. This is the time you need to be expressive, Chad.
Mr. Daybell, in this case, then, you were brought before this court to answer for the indictment filed in this case, which alleges you've committed serious crimes in that 8 felony charges have been filed in the grand jury's indictment. In that indictment, let me ask you a question. Mr. Pryor, do you have that before you? A copy of the indictment?
We do, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Is the defendant's name, Mr. Daybell, spelled and listed correctly on that indictment on the caption?
Yes, Your Honor, it is.
All right. Thank you. At this time, then, I will go through the charges that are listed in the indictment and the penalties for each charge. After doing that, then, Mr. Pryor, I'll ask your client how he pleads. So I'll read through the list of charges first, and then I'll ask for the plea after that. Then the indictment that was filed on May 25th, in count 1, charges Mr. Daybell the offenses of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception, both felony counts under Idaho Code 18-1701, 18-4003A, 18-2403.
Thanks to some of my great subscribers that told me that the grand theft, that was in relation to not only life insurance on his part, but in part of Laurie's, it was basically retaining ownership and getting Social Security benefits for children that were no longer alive. So she was taking the disability Social Security income for JJ, and as well as any other benefits that he got, as well as for Tylee. So that was the theft there.
3-1, 18-2403-4A, 18-2407-1B3. The count in count 1 names Tylee Ryan as the victim on the murder charge, and that count carries a penalty on the murder charge of it is punishable by death or imprisonment for life, and it provides that if the death penalty is not pursued by the state, then the court shall impose a life sentence with a minimum period of incarceration of 10 years. The grand theft portion of that charge has a penalty of up to 14 years of prison and a fine of up to $5,000 and possible restitution. That's a summary of those charges. and you've waived the reading of the charges. So let me ask you on that. Count one, Mr. Daybell, do you understand the charge and those possible penalties?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
Okay. The next count in the indictment is count two. That is a count of first-degree murder under Idaho Code 4001, 18.
If Chad didn't actually participate in the murder, he definitely will be found guilty of conspiracy and, of course, tampering and hiding of evidence and bodies. I don't know if he's man enough to actually take it into his own hands. He just looks like a little simpering wimp to me, but, you know, he may have. I don't know, but I hope he gets everything thrown at him. I really do.
4002, 18-4003, subsection A, and 18-4004, and that count names Tylee Ryan as the victim. The possible penalty or punishment for that count is by death or imprisonment for life, and if the death penalty is not pursued, then the court shall impose a life sentence with a minimum period of incarceration of 10 years. Do you understand that charge and the possible penalties?
Yes, Your Honor.
Count three of the indictment charges conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception. Those are felonies under the same code sites that were previously listed under count one. That count names Joshua Jackson Vallow, also known as J.J. Vallow, as the named victim in that count. And the penalty for those charges on the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder is punishable by death or imprisonment for life. And if the death penalty is not pursued, then the court shall impose a life sentence with a minimum period of incarceration of 10 years. On the charge of grand theft by deception, that would have a penalty of up to 14 years in prison and a fine of up to $5,000. Do you understand the charge in count three and those possible penalties, Mr. Daybell?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well. Count four of the indictment charges you with first-degree murder.
I don't even know if they give a red rip. I mean, look at them. I don't know if they're just embarrassed, or I'm sure they are, but whether or not they care about what happened or what their father did. I mean, at least for the murder of their mother, you would think they would show some emotion. I don't know, but they just look. I'm sure they're just in shock and awe, but I hope there's not other psychopaths in the making there.
A felony under the statute previously cited and the other counts also. That count names J.J. Vallow as the victim, and again is punishable by death or imprisonment for life. If the death penalty is not pursued, then the court shall impose a life sentence with a minimum period of incarceration of up to 10 years. Do you understand count four and the possible penalties, Mr. Daybell?
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm not sure. I mean, the state has yet to make up their mind whether they're going to pursue the death penalty. But I'm thinking for Chad, life in prison might be the worst punishment, because he probably thinks he's still some exalted thing with a God tear in his head that is going to go on to glory in the afterlife. So I'm thinking that maybe the life in prison might be the more severe punishment for him. What do y'all think? Let me know down below.
All right, the next count listed in the indictment is count five, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. That count names Tammy Daybell as the named victim.
Now's when you need to look at the kids.
Is charged
I'm going to see the
again
reaction.
under Idaho Code 18-4001, 18-4003, subsection A, and 18-1701. And that count is also punishable by death or imprisonment for life. And if the death penalty is not pursued, then the court shall impose a life sentence with a minimum period of incarceration of 10 years. Do you understand the charge in count five and the possible penalties?
Yes, Your Honor.
She was your wife. She was your...
Count six of the indictment is a charge of first-degree murder. That names Tammy Daybell is the victim. It's charged under Idaho Code 18-4001, 18-204, and 18-4003 subsection A. That
That's
count
her
also is
That's her
punishable
heart.
by death or imprisonment for life, provided that if the death penalty is not pursued, then the court shall impose a life sentence with a minimum period of incarceration of 10 years. Do you understand count 6 and those possible penalties, Mr. Daybell?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, count 7 of the indictment is not a charge against you, it's a charge against a co-conspirator. Count 8 of the indictment charges you, Mr. Daybell, with the crime of insurance fraud, which is a felony under Idaho Code Section 41-293. That is a felony that carries up to 15 years in prison and a fine of up to $15,000 plus restitution. Do you understand that charge and those possible penalties?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, count 9
He's never sold enough books to pay for that.
is also a charge of insurance fraud under that same statute. It carries the same penalty I just mentioned in count 8, which again is 15 years of prison and a $15,000 fine plus restitution. Do you understand that charge and those possible penalties?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, that is a summary then of the charges that have been filed against you and the penalties. I would also note those penalties in each of the counts could be ordered to be served either concurrently, meaning running together, or consecutively. And so do you understand those charges could also run consecutively in those different counts, Mr. Daybell?
Yes, I do.
All right, at this time then,
Which means you're never getting out of prison if they run consecutively. That means back to back to back to back. Concurrently means it would be one, they would all run side by side and he would just serve the max penalty and that would be restitution for all of them. But Daybell, with those lips, your dance card's going to be filled every night in prison.
having gone through the counts and the possible penalties, at this point, I would ask your client how he intends to plea. Before I do that, Mr. Pryor, do you have any questions for the court or anything you need to discuss with your client before I ask for the plea?
No, Judge, and I anticipate that my client will be entering a plea of not guilty to
Of
all of the
course.
charges.
All right.
Of
Thank you,
course.
Mr. Pryor. I will go through them then individually again. On count 1 of the indictment, Mr. Daybell, how do you plead?
Not guilty.
We'll enter the not guilty plea on count 1. On count 2, how do you plead?
Not guilty.
On count 3, how do you plead?
Not guilty.
On count 4, how do you plead?
Not guilty.
On count 5, how do you plead?
Not guilty.
On count 6, how do you plead?
Not guilty.
On count 8, how do you plead?
Not guilty.
And on count 9, how do you plead?
Not guilty.
Very well. Not guilty pleas are entered as to all the counts in the indictment. At this time, normally we would discuss a trial setting. I talked to counsel and chambers before we started, and given the nature of the case, we've determined that we'll set a scheduling conference 2 weeks from today to get a trial set. Does your client agree to a scheduling conference in 2 weeks and move to a trial setting right now, Mr. Pryor?
Yes, I've discussed that with him, and at this point, Judge, if you need that representation, he will represent that he's agreeable to setting this out for a status conference for the purposes of scheduling this case for further proceedings.
All right,
working
very
hard
well.
for
Do you
that
understand then?
courthouse.
We'll set your trial in 2 weeks and we're doing that today, Mr. Daybell?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. So,
I think that's pretty much it. Well, we knew he was going to plead not guilty. That's not news to anyone. But yeah, I thought you would enjoy this today. So 2 weeks, they'll discuss a trial, and then hopefully we'll actually have a trial date. Be interested to see if he's tried along with Lori or they're tried separately. That's going to be interesting. I do want to kind of watch the rest of it to see if he ever acknowledges his children back there. I'm just curious, so I may speed up just a little bit to see that.
We'll hold that hearing on June 23rd. Council, any suggestions on time? I'm thinking probably just in the morning at 9:30.
That's acceptable to the defense, Your Honor.
And that works for the state as well, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, I'll set the scheduling conference for June 23rd at 9:30 a.m. We will conduct that hearing by Zoom. That will not be a live in-person proceeding. And at that time, we will get the matter set for a trial on these counts. I believe that concludes the matters we need to bring up on this case this morning. Then, is there anything further from the state on the case today?
Nothing further from the state at this time, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. Anything further from the defense, Mr. Pryor?
Nothing further from the defense. Judge, may we be excused?
You may. Thank you, counsel.
Thank you.
That will conclude the hearing, and we'll be in recess.
All rise.
He's not even gonna look back at his kids, is he? Like, you got no love in your heart. You're just a piece of.
Son, we're grabbing burgers for dinner if you're interested.
I'm vegan, Walter.
You had bacon.
Just. Anyway, with that being said, we'll conclude this video, and I'll continue to watch this case. This weekend, I have a video on the mainstream Mormon church. It's Keto and Crime Classic, as well as I had read his very first novel, Emma, and I'll be summarizing that for you as well. And with that being said, until next time, Keto and Crime.